Good morning. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. It's great to have you here. There's some great energy in the sanctuary. How is the energy out on the pavilion? Is it good? Excellent. And how about the energy out there in Facebook land? How you doing out there in your jammies and coffee? It's good to see you out there as well. Good to be seen, I guess. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. My name is Tony Fisher. I am the minister here and grateful to be so. I welcome you, all of you, to this space this morning. As always, I give a shout out to everybody who makes this place, this time work, our staff, Anna Riazzi and David Bosworth and Stephanie St. John and Diane Jacobs and Daniel Goodsid in the AV room. Sean and Abby Allison, our co-music directors, a wonderful group of volunteers who keep this place beautiful and lively and contained and organized. Thank you all for all the work you do. And from them to the rest of you, then welcome. It's good to have you with us. Is there anybody with us for the first time this morning, if you're feeling confident about saying so? All right. Okay. Well, if anybody online is here for the first time, then we welcome you. We hope you'll let yourselves be known either in the comments section or by emailing our office administrator at office@uunaples.org. We will make sure that you get all the information you need about all the things that are going on in the congregation. There are a lot of things going on these days. Things are beginning to percolate, even more so than they have in the past month or two, and that's been significant. It's good to see a lot of returnees back this morning, back from the hinterlands. Well, you may think of this as the hinterlands. I don't know. But it's great to see you all. And today we're talking about the issues of church and state, and these are significant issues in our time and grave issues. And so I hope that we'll also try to keep it a bit lively, but I'm hoping that by the end of the day you might feel inspired to be active in the world, more active even than you are. So let's settle ourselves into our worship time with this morning's prelude.
How many roads must a man walk down before you can call him man? And how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years can a mountain exist before it's washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, how many times can a man turn his head pretending he just doesn't see. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? And how many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
The flaming chalice is a symbol of our free faith. It burns for those who defend the right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, so that each person may live according to their conscience in a democratically elected society. It burns for the defenders of freedom working against those who would impose their own religious beliefs on others through intimidation or legislation. May we tend this fire always, ever vigilant and courageous in the struggle for freedom and justice for all. Let's join together in the chalice lighting words in your order of service and on the screen. May this flame stir our hearts and remind us of our mission to be truly welcoming, to grow in mind and spirit, and to widen the circle of peace, justice, and love. And let's join together in singing our opening hymn, Rise If You're Willing or Able. Actually, I haven't talked about this yet. We'll do it in a round. I'll lead this half. You'll lead this half. We'll start together once. We'll sing it through twice or three times altogether. Sean, I'm singing on this, so welcome, rise, and we'll go. Everyone. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, yet again come.
Thank you. You're doing really well with these rounds. I like this. That's good. Come, come, whoever you are. Everyone is welcome here. How many of you have come to Unitarian Universalism from another tradition? I want you to understand clearly that you have just branded yourselves heretics. Now, we usually think of heretics as somebody who has taken made a radical change and moved away from the norm, and that in part is true. But historically, it was more neutral, at least in ancient Greece. The term heretic meant to choose. You are all choosers. You have chosen to be here. No one's forcing you, I hope. I haven't turned any arms lately, and I haven't been out on the street corner twisting any arms. But you have all chosen to be here. You are all heretics. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Michael Servetus, who in the 1400s challenged the orthodoxy of his time by writing a doctrine against the idea of the Trinity. And for his efforts, he was burned at the stake. Fortunately, I don't think any of you have that in your future. At least I hope not. But the idea that someone who stands out and makes a different choice is something that we do need to be aware of in our time. In our own history, in Unitarian Universalist history, there have been those who have also been shunned for moving away from the orthodoxy of our time, our Unitarian time. In the mid-1800s, the Reverend Theodore Parker, that same person who talked about the moral arc of the universe being long, was shunned by his fellow Unitarian ministers and sort of refused inclusion in the organized development of ministry at the time. He was shunned because he was moving away from a biblical center of our tradition. So he began to move Unitarianism away from a biblical foundation, and for that, he was pushed aside. Even before that, and when William Ellery Channing sort of talked about as the father of Unitarianism, sort of staked his flag in the sand and told about what the Unitarian doctrine was, the idea of the unity of God and the humanity of Jesus, and the idea that reason was important for us to be able to think about how we view the world, how we react to the world, what our spirit, our individualist spirit is saying. Channing was also shunned by the standing order of congregations at his time. Even in the 20th century, people like John Haynes Home, who was a significant pacifist and who argued against our involvement in World War I, was shunned by the Unitarian, sort of the larger sense of Unitarianism. So we, Unitarian Universalists, have also dealt with this idea that people who move away from us need to be sort of carefully controlled. It is a human sort of response, in a way, this idea that we need to sort of control those people who are on the fringes. And fortunately for us, as our denominations grew and then merged and then tried to find language that was meaningful for our time and our future, we incorporated into our principles the idea that the right of conscience was critical to our foundations and that the use of the democratic process was also such. So fortunately, we have responded in ways that we have seen the right of conscience as a foundational principle. Today, they are incorporated, as I said, into our principles, but we find that perhaps our principles are being threatened by a larger social movement that is having significant impact on our nation and our time. We have become complacent, perhaps, in our recent history, that our right to gather, our right to believe what we want, is firmly established, that there is a separation of church and state. But the reality is that we are under threat by those who would like to impose their own sense of what is right on the larger population. which would put us on the margins. Something we need to think about as we go through this service this morning. For now, let's sit in our space, take a deep breath, and I invite Sean and Abby to lead us in our centering hymn, Circle Round for Freedom. It's 155 in your gray hymnals. The words will be on your screen.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle round the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle.
I have both a joy and a sorrow to share this morning. The joy is that last night here in this space, Sherry Arns and Cheryl Nunes were wed. It was a joyous affair. Members of our congregation, one of the sort of largest weddings I've ever sort of officiated at, and probably one of the most spectacular parties. There was a lot of love flowing last night, and so we honor their continuing relationship. They've been together for 27 years, but they have chosen to make it legal. One of the things I said about that was that normally in a worship, in a wedding service, I will do a passage about relationship and how important it is and what you need to do to hold it close and tend it. And I didn't think I needed to do that last night for a couple that have been together 27 years. They figured it out. My sorrow this morning is the passing of Dave Pfannenstiel, a good friend of this congregation who has been with us since before the pandemic. Dave passed away a week ago today with his daughter, Kara, at his side. Dave found some freedom here at UU. While holding some to his own beliefs, he just found this place very welcoming and fulfilling in a positive way. So we mourn Dave's passing, and all those who are his friends and family, our condolences and our thoughts and prayers go with them. If anybody has a short joy or sorrow, not a political announcement, not an announcement about an event, I would invite you to put up your hand, and I will. Yes, Robin, sorry.
It is a verifiable fact that Fran Lee has graced this planet for 80 years as of today. My joy is that she doesn't look like it.
So happy birthday. And a joyous event. Anyone else? Earl.
For several years, I've been a member of the Shelter Box International received a grant from the United Nations, an International Peace Award. So we're really pleased to have been part of that organization.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So Earl was sharing that the Shelter Box organization that has created some wonderful materials, just really concrete help for immigrants and refugees, has been granted an international award for their work. So thanks, Earl, for sharing that. Anyone else? David.
I feel both joy and sorrow. My joy is that John Betcher is with us today. John has been absent because of health issues that he's had for some time, and it's so nice to see a person who's been affiliated with this congregation for many, many years, in spite of the fact that he lost his partner. His partner passed away about 2 weeks ago. And so that's the story I have, that this event happened. His partner passed away. And thank you very much. It's so good to see you, John.
Yeah.
John, why don't you stand out there?
Say one word. I've received over 30 condolence cards. They're wonderful.
John, it's good to have you. David was welcoming John Betcher back to the sanctuary after some health issues and the passing of John's partner, B.A. Butts. And John was expressing his gratitude to this congregation for your response. Thank you. Let's center into, Michael.
I'm happy to announce that the Romeos, retired old men eating out, are resurrecting this Thursday, 8 o'clock in the morning at Skillet's, the one that's in the plaza off Airport Road, and we welcome all Romeos. Retired old men eating out.
I'm just going to leave that. Let's center ourselves into a time of meditation. Spirit of life and love, as we deepen into this shared time, let us renew our commitment to one another. For those among us who have endured a loss in this past week, may your hope be uplifted by this community, and may your strength be renewed by the friendship you find here. For those in our midst who have been wrestling this week with questions that seem to have no answers, may you find inspiration in this community of thought and action. For those in our circle who have cherished an unexpected joy in the past week, may we all share in your joy and celebrate your gladness. Let us also consider those whose existence is seated in our lives, not only our physical descendants, but also those whose spirits will inherit the love we sow, the hope we reap, the promise we harvest. May those of us whose religious inheritance is freedom never rest until all who wish to be its children are sheltered. Let's share some time in silence.
מילי, וכשאני לעצמי אני, ואם לא עכשיו, המתי, אם לא עכשיו, המתי. If I am not for me, who will be? If I am just for me, what does that make me? And if not now, then when? If not now, then when? כשאני לעצמי אני, ואם לא עכשיו, המתי, אם לא עכשיו, המתי. If I am not for me, who will be? If I am just for me, what does that make me? And if not now, then when? If not now, then when?
Our reading this morning is from the author Albert Camus, taken from a speech that he gave entitled Create Dangerously. Great ideas, it has been said, come into the world as gently as doves. Perhaps then, if we listen attentively, we shall hear, amid the uproar of empires and nations, a faint flutter of wings, the gentle stirring of life and hope. Some will say that this hope lies in a nation. Others, in a person. I believe rather that it is awakened, revived, nourished by millions of solitary individuals whose deeds and works every day negate frontiers and the crudest implications of history. As a result, there shines forth fleetingly the ever-threatened truth that each and every person, on the foundation of his or her own sufferings and joys, builds for all.
And today's response is going to be the first verse I'm going to sing, and the second verse we're going to sing together, and the words will be up on the screen.
When I lift my voice, let it be in song, a defiant note in the face of wrong. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. All right. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me cry a note in the face of wrong. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to unite us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as I know I should. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. I lift my voice. Thank you.
As I was originally preparing for this service, which was going to be given on October 2nd, and we were delayed a little bit by Hurricane Ian. I was talking to Sean and Abby about, what I wanted to go with this, and they shared with me a story, and I really originally asked Sean to tell this story, but then sort of drifted away, and so he got off the hook, I guess, for that. But he was telling the story of the library on Sanibel Island and the beloved children's librarian there, who during Pride Month this year had created a wonderful display of books that were appropriate for age groups and nicely displayed, books that were well distributed across the country and similarly lifted up during Pride Month as important ways for children to access information and ideas, again, in an age-appropriate way. Well, a few people on Sanibel saw the display and got a little bit upset and feeling like this was not appropriate for a library, a public library. And instead of going directly to the library, they went to the news media and sort of brought up arguments against such a display, that it was, truly inappropriate to have this kind of material displayed. Fortunately for them, the media doesn't make decisions about what goes on in the library, and perhaps they weren't aware that in order to sort of talk about library decisions and actions, they needed to go through the library board. And so the library board called a meeting to sort of talk about this. And also, fortunately, at that time, a lot of people showed up for that meeting, out sort of overwhelmingly on the side of the idea that freedom of idea, freedom of thought, freedom of orientation was important. And so in that meeting, the idea that people have a voice was magnified. The idea that the voice of sort of freedom of ideas and thoughts, freedom of identity was important and upheld. The story didn't end there with that outpouring of people on both sides who argued over 2 hours about it, but still, the issue is still sort of bubbling. Obviously, Sanibel is in a very different place right now. But as Abby and Sean have reported to me, the undercurrents of this are continuing to happen even in the aftermath of a hurricane that devastated much of the island. People will have to show up again. In the United States, we like to think of ourselves as a democratic nation that has sort of moved forward with the idea of freedom as important, that our democracy is well-found and holds together well. What we often fail to understand is that the idea of authoritarianism rests very comfortably within this democracy. We think about our own freedoms, of course, and the freedoms that have allowed this country to grow and prosper. And we sometimes conveniently leave behind our authoritarian stance about people who don't look like us. We work hard and have worked hard historically to keep people in their place. Slavery lasted for 400 years in this nation. Is that not authoritarianism? Our ideas about immigration and who should be allowed and who shouldn't be allowed in this country reek of an authoritarian point of view. The idea that an authoritarian movement is growing in this country should not necessarily be a surprise. This is a time of great upheaval. There's a source of growing pressure in our nation. The United States has slowly become less white, less Christian, according to the polls, less powerful, much more diverse. It's become more secular overall, more cosmopolitan. This has collided with a different understanding of America as a white Christian nation favored by God and ruled by white men, ready to defend freedom with whatever they can bring, including violence. When we look at the insurrection on January 6th of 2021 and all the various signs about we're here for Christ or don't tread on me, we have to think that that is just the tip of an iceberg that has been existent in this nation for a long time. The fact that it's currently being organized really well and funded by a small group of very wealthy families should be of major concern. The rank and file of this movement come to it with a variety of concerns. Questions, as we do, of life's deeper meaning. They have a love and appreciation for God and Scripture. They enjoy, a sort of family solidarity, hope of community and friendship, all the things that we also hope for. But they also come to this time with a longing for certainty in a very uncertain world. Against a backdrop of growing economic inequality, rapid technological change, climate instability, a lot of people feel that the world has entered a state of disorder. And a movement that provides answers and solidity and a vision of a future provides them with an idea that perhaps the world can be safe. As I talked about earlier, this is not a new movement in the United States. Just after 1619, after the first slaves arrived in this nation, a choice was made to accept. In the late 1600s, there was a growing fervor, Christian fervor, for bringing people back to the foundations of Christian life, of Puritan life, that was basically white and exclusionary, reinforcing the ideas that we could hold these people at bay because we were the people that should make decisions about our country, our lives. This is an important issue in our nation today as a growing movement, labeled Christian nationalism, has begun to impact our lives significantly. Here in Florida, in the past year, we've seen and heard about teachers who are being trained to teach civics with a particular mindset. The curriculum has not necessarily been changed, but the interpretation of history has, and the way that teachers are asked to teach it has. In the past year, within 1 week in June, the Supreme Court decided in favor of the coach in Bremerton, Washington, that allowing prayer in a public space with school children. They abolished the constitutional right to abortion, something we'll talk about in January. They voted to enforce the taxpayers to fund private religious institutions, giving religious educational institutions the right and access to public funds. These are significant challenges to the idea of church and state. This is a complex issue, truly complex. It involves a great deal of history and movement, a lot of working behind the scenes. And this movement is a combination of both sort of a mass movement of people who are, in some ways, feeling, as I described it, lost in a world that is changing so rapidly. But they're being led by a group of people who are doing this for their own benefit. One of the things that Kathleen Stewart, who will be with us next week for our forum, said is that the basic idea of this movement is not a different way of expressing a religion to enhance or expand our pluralistic society. The idea is to limit pluralism in this country. And that the ultimate goal is not that or the idea of freedom of religion in their own way, but to hollow out a democracy for the benefit of their own greed, and also to try to create control in a society that seems to them to be out of control. For us to minimize the deep story that they hold would be a serious mistake. Has been a serious mistake. So what can we, as individuals, as a community, do about this? This is not the first time that we've been in this situation, as I mentioned, in our nation's history. Sometimes the choice has been, instead of going to the left and being more inclusive and more welcoming and opening up our society to live fully into its values, we have chosen to go to the other direction towards more concern about crime and law and order. It's an easy move to make, and people are fearful. So we have moved away from some opportunities to actually choose more inclusive nature. It's what happened in 1787 when the framers of our Constitution chose to sort of put off the question of slavery. It happened again at the end of the 60s after the Civil Rights Movement, when the idea of the issues of crime sort of elevated themselves so that we could push the idea of civil rights off to the side a little bit. Our country has often taken maybe some steps forward, but also taken some steps backwards. What will be necessary for us is to begin to work in similar ways to what this Christian nationalist movement is doing, to make connections much broader than we're comfortable with others who feel very similarly that our democracy is threatened, but who may think and feel differently about religious ideas or political ideas. We need to be able to also rid ourselves of some fundamental ideas that we've held as liberals for a long time. Yes, we need to ally ourselves with those who share a commitment to liberal democracy, but we also need to think about expanding our circle. You know, our mission statement here at UUCGN is that we hope to widen the circle of peace, justice, and love. Sometimes we find that difficult, especially with folks who think differently than we do. we sometimes, as liberals, within sort of the framework of our idea of a progressive society, tend to favor the idea of meritocracy and technocracy, and we have in the past found ourselves on the wrong side of some issues, such as eugenics in the past. We need to recognize our own histories of exclusionism, understand that we need to change in order to help protect our democracy. We need to be able to reach across divides. I don't know how many times I've spoken to people in this congregation and outside it who find it very difficult to talk to people with different ideas, senses of what is right and good. But that is what's needed now. The other thing that's needed is for us to show up, and I know so many of you do that. And yet, it has to happen, as in Sanibel. People will need to continue to show up at local meetings, because this is where democracy happens. Something I heard recently is that one of the reasons we're struggling with democracy in this country is we really don't know how to do it. In a congregational basis, on a local basis, on a societal basis, we are not practiced in democracy and in sort of constructive argument and conversation and coming to compromise. And we don't do it well. We don't do it well here. We don't do it well locally. We tend to follow the divides. We tend to feel the divides and to point and to argue. It's hard work. Hard work. The vision of America that I hold to is that it's an experiment. For 200 years, we have defied the odds. Really. While at the same time holding people at bay. We've held together a democracy that isn't fully a democracy. It's not yet still. Here in the United States, before the development of the Constitution, 8 of the 13 colonies were theocracies, comfortably so, and had to be challenged in that notion. In our Unitarian history, Unitarians, at the end of the time when states continued to sort of be controlled by particular religious points of view, Unitarians held sway in Massachusetts as the organization that received public funding for the ministers and for the teaching, the education of the children. And Unitarians didn't want to give that up either. We like to have control. We like to have the funds flowing in our direction. But now that's the battle we face. One of my colleagues has written a wonderful meditation. Before I go there, I've talked in the past also about the idea that we need to be able to talk religiously, because, in fact, while we want to maintain a separation of church and state in the systems and the policies and the laws of our government, if we can't argue from our inner self, from our spirit, from our sense of values and what is right and what is good, our ideas just about the right of conscience, if we can't argue from in a soulful way, in a spiritual way, and we do it just from our heads, what's a battle we'll lose? So one of the things we need to be able to do is be able to articulate what we feel, how we feel, why we feel it, in a way that's more powerful, bringing our values out front, and not just the political points. And so I offer you this meditation by the Reverend Tamara Labeck to close this. Spirit of life and love, God of many names, We who are endowed with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, express our gratitude that in this country there is no national religion. There is no superior race. There is no preferable gender orientation. We gather holding a common value that the glory of this country rests first and foremost in its diversity. Out of many ideas, out of many beliefs, out of many views, out of many voices, out of many passions, out of many experiences, we must be one. Let us never forget that we need not be alike to live and love alike. May we be forgiven this day for our national and individual transgressions when we have chosen inaction or silence in the face of injustice. When we have chosen inaction or silence in the face of the abuse of power and our failure to claim our own. May we be forgiven for those times when we have not known our own neighbor, fed our hungry, or equipped the next generation with the knowledge they need and the love they deserve. Let us ask for a blessing on this nation according to our own faith and forms, and pledge our voices in support of the movement towards true freedom. In the names of those who have come before, in the names of all who struggle for the rights we enjoy, and for those who will inherit the fruits of our work. There is much work to be done. We need to show up again and again. They say that an educated populace is the key to a strong democracy. There is so much information available to us to learn and understand those who would limit our freedoms. I urge you to read, to look, to listen. I hope you'll be here next weekend when Catherine Stewart, author of The Power Worshippers, an incredible book about the rise of Christian nationalism in this country, is with us in the forum after our service, taking questions, helping us understand a little bit more deeply what she has seen in 12 years of reporting on this issue. In my own conversation with Catherine this past week, I asked her, this book was written in 2019, I asked her how her spirit was today, because so much has transpired. And she said, I'm not optimistic, but I'm not pessimistic. I believe that there are, in this nation, there are ways, there are things that we can fall back on. There are ways that we have in the past acted and moved forward. And as long as people will do that, continue to do that, persevere in that, then there is hope. So may it be. So here's the part of the service I've been looking forward to, not asking you for money, which is what I'm doing, but we've heard this song before, but it's always worth repeating. The offering for the ongoing mission of this congregation will be gratefully received.
free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could know all the things that I should say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart. Remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree that everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things that I can't do, though I'm way overdue. I'd be starting anew. Well, I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. Oh, I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing 'cause I know, yeah, I'd sing 'cause I know, yeah, and I could sing 'cause I know how it feels. Oh, I know how it feels to be free. Yeah, I know how it feels to be free.
I think we'll skip the last hymn today. Daniel, we'll skip the last hymn. Things going on, there's a lot going on. So this week begins the Wonderful Wednesdays program. I'll be offering Vesper service at 5:30 on late Wednesday afternoon. We'll join together in some fellowship and sharing a meal. And I'll be doing the first part of a 3-part series on the practice of Unitarian Universalism, blending some ideas of history and theology, but also on why people in their movement in the past have acted as they have. And then we'll move forward. There's 3 other sessions, one on November 30th, and then another one early in January. As I mentioned during the service, next Sunday here after the service, we will be joined on Zoom by Catherine Stewart, the author of The Power Worshippers. This is an incredible opportunity for us to speak to somebody on a national level who's been doing significant work investigating the rise of Christian nationalism. So I hope you'll stay tuned after the service next week for that. And finally, if you are at Loose Ends for Thanksgiving, I hope that you'll sign up for a small group Thanksgivings. We're hopefully offering small group collections of people who are at Loose Ends for Thanksgiving, and we're looking for people to join us in that, but also maybe a couple of people who might be willing to host. So either of those things, let us know. Look at the newsletter and respond that way. So we will forego the closing hymn, Daniel, and we'll move right to the benediction by Aung San Suu Kyi. It is not enough merely to call for freedom, democracy, and human rights. There has to be a united determination to persevere in the struggle, to make sacrifices in the name of enduring truths, to resist the corrupting influences of desire, ill will, ignorance, and fear. And may we who have inherited the freedom of conscience never rest until all those who wish to be its children are sheltered. Go in peace. Go in love.